Hey, welcome to Journey Online. So glad you're viewing with us. That little video that we started with asks this question. It says, I love you, and has a series of questions. And it leads us to a bigger picture, and it's what I want to deal with today. The bigger picture is this, is what do you do when someone's words and their actions don't match? All of us have experienced that. You can figure out times, sometimes it doesn't matter. It's somebody at a distance and you're like, they say something and you feel like that's never going to happen. No, that is not true. But you know what? You can't let everything stupid that somebody says in your world, so you just move on. But sometimes the people who say that is somebody deeply within your circle of trust. It's somebody who says, I love you. Some of you grew up in a home where people said, I love you, or someone said, I love you, and then you watch their actions and you're like, I'm not so sure you do, or maybe, I'm sure you don't. Some of you entered into a marriage or a relationship and said, I do. Do you love? I love. Do you love? I love. And it felt so good, but over the course of time, the words and the actions didn't match up. And there's deep hurt from that. There's a story that goes with it. I sure get that. But in the end, what do you do when the words and the actions don't match up? When it's somebody you really care about, you end with a lot of anger or frustration or discouragement or resentment or fill in the blank. I bet you have a word for how you feel about it, and I bet you can think of somebody close to you. What is it like when the people that matter to you say things, but their words don't match what they say? Maybe even a tougher question then, beyond that one, is what do you do when God's words don't seem to match His actions? How do you play that one out? That's a tough one. You say, well, I don't think that ever happens. I think for a lot of us, we feel like that has happened. That God's words and His actions. There's some of you that are just wading your way back in. And maybe while you're watching this from a distance today, wading your way back in toward faith because you feel like at one point I trusted and God didn't do what I anticipated God doing because what I believed about God, and now I'm not sure I can trust Him. It may be that you went to church somewhere and you go, man, people who claim God, and then I saw the way they acted or the way I've been treated and I've been deeply hurt. And man, I hate that. As a person who works in the church world, I hate that. But I know it's true for many, maybe most. There's a lot of broken people in church, so we bump into broken stuff. I hate that. What do you do when the words and the actions don't match up? I want to talk to you about a passage in the Bible where it seems like God's words, Jesus' words, and His actions don't match up. It's a really complicated one. When I was in college, I had a professor, one of the guys that when I was there that struck me the most, he taught a class on Proverbs that I sat in, and Proverbs is all about wisdom, but one of the things I figured out about this guy is he seemed wise, not just smart. Smart's a dime a dozen. Educated's a dime a dozen. Not saying it's not a good thing. I'd take it over where I am, but I'll just say this, smart and wisdom are so much different. He just seemed like a guy who had so much wisdom, and so one day I asked him, Dr. Lyles, you seem to talk about wisdom a lot, and you seem like a very wise human being. What would you tell somebody young like me? That's been a minute, okay, get off it. What would you tell somebody like me? I've got a whole life ahead of me. What wisdom would you give me? And he said, immediately, he said, Kris, you need to understand the character of God, who God really is, how God really is. You need to understand God's character above everything else. Well, that sounds like a hyper spiritual answer that you would get from a Bible college professor. So I asked the next question, why? Why is that so important? He said, because sooner or later you're going to bump into situations where it feels like what's going on and who God really is aren't matching up. And you'll do something if you're not careful, you'll give up. You'll just say, you know what? Hey, I'm out. O-U-T, out of here. And he said it's so important for you to come to a full understanding of who God is outside of your current circumstances, because that's who you'll have to trust. The way I've kind of surmised that, it's been a lot of years, I'm still talking about it, so it hit me pretty hard. The way I surmise that is I better be careful to understand who God is, because if I don't, when things go sideways that I don't understand, I'll give up. But instead of that, I need to ask, what's up? When God doesn't act the way that God seems, I need to say, what's up with that? What's going on that I don't understand? One of those places in John chapter 11, where the writer in John, who walked with Jesus every day, who lived his life for 3+ years with Jesus. Now Jesus has lived, he's died, he's risen, and he's gone. A period of time, and now John begins to chronicle everything that happened in Jesus' life meticulously. He gives us these great narratives and accounts of things that happened with Jesus. And in John chapter 11, he says some things about Jesus and things that Jesus said that don't seem to match his actions and who he is. His words and his actions don't seem congruent. As a matter of fact, one day, John is writing that Jesus was in Jerusalem, and from a neighboring town, a servant of some friends of Jesus came running in and said, hey, the friend you love is very sick. Very sick. When he wrote the friend you love, because this tells us this isn't just a stranger, although sometimes Jesus healed strangers. Although sometimes Jesus healed people he had never even met. This one comes in and says, this is somebody you love, and it's from a family of people you love. And he leaves, and the guys start to gather their stuff up, and Jesus goes, no, cool your jets. He didn't say cool your jets, that's my words. You probably thought he did, right? He said, listen, let's just stay here. We're not going right now, to which they had to think, wait a minute, you're Mr. Compassion, you're Mr. Healer of the sick, and this isn't just a somebody, this is a somebody. This is somebody you love and somebody's family member that you love. Mr. I care for people, I come to save the world. Why wouldn't your words and your actions aren't matching up? And so Jesus begins to talk them through this interaction, and when he does, he finally reaches a point after a couple of days when he says, okay, I think it's time to go. Well, by now they'd kind of forgotten maybe, they'd kind of moved past it, but they'd also remembered something else. They come to him and they say, but Rabbi, a short while ago the Jews tried to stone you, and yet you're going back. Last time you were there, you just about got killed, which means we just about got killed, and I'm against getting killed. So how about no on that one? Hey, here's a thought. Everybody's doing this these days, working remotely, distance healing. Why don't you do that? Why don't you just fix him from far away because you're Jesus and you can do that? Been there, done that. Why don't we stay here and do something miraculous there? Everybody wins. He's healed. They're happy. We don't get hit with rocks. And Jesus did not go for that. As a matter of fact, he told them there's more going on. As a matter of fact, he said some things right after this that are just phenomenal. They're so difficult to understand, his words and his actions. As a matter of fact, he says what I believe is the most insensitive thing Jesus ever said while he was on planet Earth. That's a little tease to get us going. When we get down to it, Jesus said this to him. He said, our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I'm going there to wake him up. The guys often lived very confused by what Jesus said. One, I thought we would go, and now we didn't. And then now we're going, but I don't think we should. And now he says, our friend Lazarus is asleep, to which they weren't always the sharpest knives in the drawer, or however we say that. So his disciples replied, Lord, if he sleeps, he'll get better. Hey, get him a Z-Pack and some cough syrup. Give him a couple days rest. It'll be fine. We don't need to go anyway. This is good. This is a good thing. He'll use teledoc. He won't even have to get out of the house. Yay for this. Jesus doesn't let it go. As a matter of fact, he started saying some other things. He said, then he told them plainly, hey boys, Lazarus is dead. When I said he is sleeping, what I meant is dirt nap, sleeping. He's dead. He's expired. He's gone. Lazarus is dead. That wasn't the most insensitive thing. That's just him getting to the bottom line. They didn't understand that. So now he says Lazarus is dead, which if you're them, you've got to go, correct me if I'm wrong, if he's dead, we still can stay here. Dead guy, nothing we can do about that. Let's stay here. And then Jesus elaborates more. Then he told them plainly, Lazarus is dead, and makes this statement. Boy, here's one. Try to understand this. The Holy One, the one that loves more, the one who gave his life for everyone, makes this statement. And for your sake, talking to the disciples, and for your sake, I'm glad I was not there. The person Jesus loved in a family of people that Jesus loved, who have cared deeply for him and he cares deeply for them, Where in the world does this statement come from? The one whose love is infinite. Where does this come in? For your sakes, I'm glad I wasn't there. He's dead. Get this one. And I'm glad I wasn't there to fix it. Their heads had to be spinning. What do you do with that knowledge? By the way, this is a spot where you go, that's not what I thought Jesus would say. That's not what I thought Jesus would do. It makes absolutely no sense. So he finishes it. For your sake, I'm glad I was not there. Why? So that you may believe. So that you may believe. Now, the next thing that happened is interesting because in every group there's somebody who is always on the negative side. I don't know if you remember Winnie the Pooh back in days gone by. He had a friend, my favorite character in the Winnie the Pooh story is Eeyore. Eeyore always found something negative. He had a voice, he had the look, he had it all. What a great character. Jesus had an Eeyore in his group. His name was Thomas, and Thomas said, well, I guess let's all go so we can die with him. Might as well just go and get it over with. All of this is happening. I'm glad I didn't fix it. I'm glad I wasn't there for your sake, for your benefit. I'm glad I wasn't there. I'm glad we didn't go. We might as well go. And then he begins to dig a little bit deeper. I'm glad I wasn't there so that you may believe. Let's look at two words in that. Believe what? That's the question. We're going to come back to that one in a second because he says it again. I'm glad I wasn't there, and it's not because I don't care. See, that would have been implied, right? I'm glad I wasn't there, not because I don't care, but so you may believe. The big question, the overarching question is believe what? Believe you don't care? Believe that you didn't show up? Believe that in this moment where he thought he could count on you and his family thought they could, that you didn't show up? Believe what? Great question, isn't it? Believe what? Let me ask one more. Who do you think the you in this was? We know that the you was them standing there, but I'm going to tell you, I believe the you was bigger than that. As our friend John sits to write this, he's not writing it for the guys that were there. He's writing it for the people that would read what he's written. You know, that includes you and me. I engineered this whole situation with the person I love and me not going there, and I'm glad I wasn't there. You know why? So that you, wherever you're sitting, so that you might believe, so that I might believe, so that your mother, your grandfather, your child might believe. Believe what? We're going to get to that. But we need to understand that you, if we put a big circle around it, it puts you in the middle of the circle. As John pens this, he's saying, I'm writing this because Jesus' message was, all of this was engineered. It's not what you expected, and I know it's tough to hear. And for him to say, I'm glad, is painful. But listen, before you quit believing, before you give up, maybe you need to ask what's up. And what's up is he did it so that you, me, might believe. Well, Jesus reaches a point and he goes, it's time for us to go. As he heads away 2 miles from Jerusalem to Bethany, so that's maybe an hour max. There's a little elevation change. It's not paved roads, you know. They didn't get their holes patched enough and they all ended up dirt roads back then. And so maybe an hour's walk. As they begin to make their way, a servant from their home has already been there, as others are passing their way, coming and going from Bethany, because a lot of people knew Lazarus. He was very well respected. He was very influential. And somebody sees Jesus, runs back and tells Martha and Mary, the sisters of Lazarus, that the rabbi is on his way. And so Martha immediately, and if you can picture this, Martha's a little bit chapped about this whole situation. She's a little wired up. She's a little torqued. Find the word that fits for you. For everybody that knows a Martha, she has got questions that she wants answered now. So she heads out. He's on his way to Bethany. She heads out toward him, walks up the trail till she finds him. And this is what she says, Lord, Martha said to Jesus, imagine a little attitude with this. If you can't imagine it, you've obviously not lived with an angry person named Martha. If you had been here, my brother would not have died. if you had been here, he wouldn't be dead. In other words, this is your fault. What the heck? Why? We have cared for you. We have cooked for you. We have followed you. We have believed what you say. What more would we have to do? What would it have taken for you just to get up and walk an hour, walk 40 minutes or 30 minutes to care for our brother? What have we done to you that would cause this reaction? She is going off. You know what? This happened and it's your fault. You could have stopped it. Is that point blank enough for you? Have you ever felt that way, by the way, with God? Why? Just explain that. How could that happen to my family? How could that happen to me? And I've tried so hard. And how could I have grown up in that kind of abuse? And how could I have ended up with that? I've tried to do it the right way. I know I haven't been perfect, but why? Why me? Why now? Why haven't you? You know what? You could have stopped it. And there's people all over our planet who've reached a point where they said, you know what, this is your fault. If it's not you and never has been you, I bet you know of a you that would fit their story. She kind of goes off on him. He makes his way further as he talks to her, as he explains things. Before he gets to Bethany, her sister Mary catches up and she goes down the same route. What is up with that? Explain this to me. What in the world? Your words have always been this and now your actions are this and I don't know what to do with that. And they make their way into town. And Jesus looks at Martha and Mary and the people he loves that are there, the people he's invested in, who've invested in him. I love this verse. And when Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews that had come along with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in spirit, and he was troubled. This is a weird thing because Jesus knows what's next, and he knows what was last, and he knows everything in between, but it shows us something super important. And the super important part is what this whole interaction is about, what this whole dialogue, what this whole narrative is about. Don't miss this. Don't get so lost in the details that you miss the bigger picture. The bigger picture is life changing. He looks at them and it breaks his heart that their hearts are broken. Jesus dealt with life and death every day. He was going to deal with life and death even more. He's going to deal with it for all eternity. What a rabbi wouldn't do in that day is show emotion. Rabbis didn't. The teacher didn't. Men didn't. And then for some reason, when the Bible was put into written form, it wasn't with books and chapters and verses. That came way after, hundreds of years after, however long after. And when they began doing that, we're in John chapter 11 and verse 33. Just 2 verses away, they made a critical decision when they were putting numbers beside things. And I think they made a brilliant decision. They made a decision that this next verse 35 deserved to be a standalone verse. That may not mean anything to you if you're just not geeked out on Bible things, but it'll make sense to you now because this is what it said. Jesus wept. That could have been sucked into verse 34, slid into verse 36. They just decided that had so much meaning it needed to stand alone. And man, it does need to stand alone. Jesus knew, and if you've ever read the story, you know what's next. Jesus wasn't weeping because Lazarus was dead, because Jesus can deal with dead. Jesus was weeping because the people he loved were hurting. And when Jesus saw that, it broke his heart. Their broken hearts broke his heart, and he was moved deeply. And he did something that people didn't do, men didn't do, the rabbi, the teacher would never do, is he showed his emotion. And he cried, not like he had one of those moments where you go, oh boy, my allergies today. What about that? No, not that. Doesn't say that. Well, so how do you know? I read the next stuff. How? I mean, it always helps before you speak to read the rest of the passage, and I did. How do I know that it wasn't just a sniffle? It wasn't just a momentary thing? Because it began to show up for other people. Jesus, as this occurred, reached a point where the people around him said, look, he weeps. And they divided, not necessarily physically, but they were divided into two groups. If you read verse 36 and following, it says there were those who said, and this is, if it was this group, if it was you, the people watching this, if we put you all in a group and you saw Jesus moved by this, some of you would go, man, look how much he cared about Lazarus. Look how much he cares about Mary and Martha. He is moved. You don't see guys do that. He is so distraught. He is so moved. He is so compassionate. Look how much he cares. That's one group. And then there's another group that said, wait a minute, this is ridiculous. Because just days ago, there was a guy who had been blind from birth, and Jesus bumped into him, came across him, and healed him. He didn't even know the guy. He's a total stranger. And if he could heal that guy, he could have healed Lazarus. What's up with that? Look at Jesus, how he cares. His words and his actions don't match. Isn't that life? Man, there's perspective that changes. Both of them were exactly right. Both of them were spot on. And so as Jesus gets close, they walk out to where the tomb, it was a cave in the side of a hill. And when he got there, he looked and everybody settled him for a moment. And he makes this statement as he kind of lifts his voice. He says, take away the stone. By the way, that was no easy thing. That wasn't like I have a button. It's like a garage door. The stone that they put there was put there to stay, either forever or till some point when they took the bones out and put them in a special place. But usually it was meant to be there. It wasn't some rocks. It was a stone. It took people. It wouldn't have been 15 seconds. It might have been hours to get that thing moved. It also meant a bunch of people had to ask another question. Is it worth it? Can I trust him enough for us to go to this much work to move the stupid stone? And by the way, the win after the stone is there's a dead dude in there. Sign up for that, anybody? Move the stone. And so eventually they did. And then it gets even more interesting. Take away the stone, and by this time, there was a bad odor. As a matter of fact, they told him, said, you can't do that now. Because it's been there for 4 days. Hey, you didn't miss his sickness. You didn't just miss his death. You missed his funeral. You missed the morning that came after. It's been 4 days, and by the way, this stinks. See what I did there? Not just the situation, but in those places, in those days, bodies began to decompose in the heat with very little to keep them substantial. By now, 4 days in, you don't want to move that stone. And they're like, I don't think you want to do that because this is a bad situation and you're taking insult and introducing it to his good friend injury. This is not a smart move. So they took away the stone and Jesus looked up, because that's what you do in situations like this, is you look up. And what he says is so important. He says, Father, I thank you that you have heard me. He says, Father, I thank you that you've heard me. In other words, I've already been praying. You've heard this conversation. This isn't new to you. I'm not bringing this to you. It's not, hello, it's me down here on earth. Bad news. He's saying, listen, I thank you that you've already heard me. And then he begins to explain. This is so smart. He said, I knew that you always hear me, but I said this for the benefit of the people standing here. And then he makes this statement again, that they may believe, which leads us to a question. Believe what? Why do you keep making these open-ended statements? I did it so you could believe. Believe what? Believe in Santa Claus? Believe in the Easter Bunny? Believe in gravity? Believe what? I'm saying this out loud for them to hear because there's something going on. And instead of giving up, I'm going to ask, what's up? And in doing that, here's the question. What is going on and how is that going to help me believe? Here's your answer. What? Believe what? What do you want me to believe? I want them and I want you. That would be the you that was surrounding him, and that would be the you that would read this book. It would be the you that would talk about it in 2024. It would be the you that's wherever you are and the you that's wherever I am. I want you to believe that you sent me. As he's talking to God his Father, He's saying what I want them to believe, the reason I've engineered this entire situation is just one thing. I want them to believe you sent me. To which I would ask, you let a man die, like go dead, cold as ice, dead? You let a man die, you let a family hold him, you let them mourn, all because of this? You want them to believe you sent me? And his answer would be, yeah, I did. Do those words and actions match up? First read, it just seems harsh, doesn't it? I want them to believe that you sent me. Why is you sent me so important? I think this is so cool. What he's wanting to say is, I came to this earth, and the reason I came to this earth, and I hope you'll understand this, I hope you'll stick this in your head and let it make its way down to your heart. The reason Jesus came to the earth wasn't just to do some amazing things, it was to show people what the Father is like. He's going to demonstrate what the Father is like. That's super important for us to know, because he wasn't always going to be here. And there were going to be times, like Dr. Lyles said, when the actions or what's going on around me doesn't match up with what I expected from God. And when that happens, I better understand God's character. Jesus is saying, I want to teach you the Father's heart. And if seeing these people hurt made me hurt, if seeing their broken heart broke my heart, if seeing their reaction to this affects me, then you can know this, that when you hurt, it affects your Father in heaven. It affects your Father. When you are broken, he feels the brokenness of that moment. When you are disillusioned, he can feel, he empathizes, he feels everything that you feel, and he cares. And that's a big deal. The whole reason I've engineered this whole situation is that you, watch it on that little phone, watch it on that flat screen TV, watching on your iPad, watching wherever you're watching, it's so that you might believe that you are the one who sent me. Not just believe something, believe that you are the one. And as they see me, then I want them to see what you're like. And as they see what you're like, it's going to change everything for them, because this story didn't end right there. This narrative didn't end right there. It goes on. And when he had said this, Jesus called out in a loud voice, and he said, Lazarus, come out. And the dead man came out. This is the time where several people had to go get a change of garments, we'll say. This is when some of them were laying flat out, and they're like, what? This is the point where people never stop talking about this day the rest of their life. What do you got to talk about better than this story? You know, I was there one day and it was so confusing. The words and this didn't matter. And then Jesus came along and they were like, what is the matter with you? This is your fault. And she was all up in his face and he was like, whoa down. And finally he said, I've done this for a reason and here's the reason. And then he said, dead man, come out. And then that dead dude walked out and they took off his grave clothes. And he was fully alive. Kind of smelled bad, but fully alive. It tells us that if the heart of Jesus was broken because the heart of the people he loved was broken, then the heart of God your Father breaks when yours breaks. It hurts when you hurt. When you feel that it's too difficult, he carries that with you, that he feels it. But it also tells you one other thing, that he is able for something better. It doesn't just mean he feels, we can have a little pity party to get, bless your heart. It's not that. It's not just that he cares, but it's a big deal that he cares, because if he doesn't care, what he's able to do is irrelevant. But first, that he cares, deeply is moved. And then the other side is that he is able, he is capable to change the situation, whether now or later. He's able to change that situation, whether it's today or down the road. Whether he had said to Lazarus, come out, you dead dude, get out here, or whether it was in eternity he was made to be alive. And for many of us, we've grown up and we've heard people talk about someday you're going to be reunited with. Someday, even those who didn't live as long as I thought they should, that there is more than what I see in this life. And I think almost anybody on planet Earth that's willing to be completely honest recognizes that there's more to this than what meets the eye. There's something native within us. There's something internal. There's something that is organically put in human beings. Drive down the furthest dirt road anywhere in humanity, and you will find people, some who've just looked at the stars, that go, I know there's more to this. The only people who struggle with it are the people who've been talked out of it or educated out of it, but there's something within us that just goes, I don't know all of it, but I know there's something. I know there's someone. And he's just saying, whether right now or down the road, not only do I care, but I'm able. The story is so amazing. The dead man came out, and then the result, therefore, many of the Jews who had come to visit Mary and had seen what Jesus did believed in him. You think? You know what they believed about him? That he was the one that God sent, that he was God's son. And as they saw the way he reacted in this moment, it told them how the Father reacts, and because of that, they placed their trust in him. Isn't that amazing? Isn't that an amazing little narrative? What a brilliant set of circumstances. But it all comes back to this. It's a guy who said, I'm glad I wasn't there. The words and his compassion didn't match up unless you finish the rest of the story. And Jesus said, I'm going to have a speed bump in this story right here, and I'm going to do it because there's people all over planet Earth that need to know that the Father who sent me cares about them, and he is able to care for them. He is able to save them. He is able to forgive them, and he will. Jesus looked at life so differently than we did. It wasn't just, I've got these few days on earth and then it's over. It's like life is just beginning and I'm setting you up for eternity for the win. And whatever I have to do, even if it means I'm going to push pause on a story that I hate to pause, even if it means somebody's going to misunderstand what's going on, even if it meant momentary hurt for Mary and Martha and the people I love, I will gladly make that provision for the long-term eternal win. One of the guys that was standing around that day, his name was Peter, and Peter lived a life and he went through so much pain. He lived a life where some of the things he hoped for didn't happen. Some of the people he loved most were taken from him brutally. Because he placed his faith in Jesus, he lost some of the people he loved most. He went through imprisonment, he went through difficulties, everything that you can imagine. This is what he found. Circumstances aren't always an indicator of God's absence. Because things are bad right now doesn't mean that God's asleep. Circumstances are not an indicator of God's absence. Can I just say, wherever your hurt is right now, wherever it has been, and you've like, if God loved me, he would have. And I understand that feeling, and trust me, I've said that. Most of us at some point in time go, I just don't get it. Can I just say, rather than give up, ask what's up, because even if you don't know the answer to what's up, something's up. Because God's character is that he loves you and there's nothing he wouldn't do. There's nothing he wouldn't do. And the proof is that he gave his son, who demonstrated that life and then gave his life on our behalf. The circumstances are not an indicator of God's absence. The same guy, Peter, that went through all that later wrote these words. He said, so humble yourselves, therefore, under God's mighty hand, and he will lift you up, in this beautiful phrase, in due time. It's not give up, it's what's up. And what's up means that right now won't always explain it, but in due time you can count on him. Just like Mary and Martha figured out about Jesus, just like his disciples and all of the yous across the way can figure out in him. And that as a result of the pain and the struggle and the crazy good and the crazy bad that this guy named Peter experienced, he said these words, so you can cast all your care on him. You can bring to him everything you're carrying, much like Mary and Martha did. What is up? This is your fault. I don't know what to do. I am brokenhearted. What more could I have done? You can come and unload all of your cares. He's a big boy and he can deal with it. And he does it with compassion, not condemnation. You can cast all your care. You can come to him and say, I can't do this anymore. I don't understand why. You can do all of that with him because there's a reason you can do all that. It's because he cares for you. Because he cares. And you know how we know? Because he sent somebody before him to demonstrate what it looked like. And he would do almost anything. He'd even be glad that I wasn't there because it's a chance for me to show you so that you can believe. Believe what? Believe that I am the one that you sent. And as my heart is broken, so is your heart broken, and there's nothing outside your reach you won't and can't do. If you've known me very long, for some of you that are watching this, we've had discussions before when you're going through really difficult things, and I've shared this with you, and it's not mine. I've just taken it from years and years and years ago. I've prayed this prayer so many times. I've talked about it on these cameras before. And some of you have written me back, or some of you have contacted me and said, hey, tell me that thing again. And this is where I live, and it's what we'll leave with you today. When you face something that is so overwhelming, and it seems like the words of God and the actions of God aren't matching up, this is where I try to land. And it's just as honest as I can be about it. It's not brilliant. It just says, I know you can, because I know He can, because I watched Him heal a dead man. I've watched Him change my life. I've watched Him transform lives all around me, but sometimes it just feels like, why are you standing 2 miles away? I need you here. I need you now. My prayer is, I know you can. And I hope you will, man. I don't want to live this, even in this moment. Could you change this moment for me? And then when I finish with that, I need this wisdom of Dr. Lyles to say, but either way, I trust you still. I know you can. I hope you will. But either way, I trust you still. Instead of give up, I'm going to ask what's up. And I'm going to watch and wait, because you always play that out in the end. The God of the universe cares so much for you, and His heart breaks when yours breaks. When the people around you are hurting and you wish you could fix it so badly, can I ask you, lean into this? I know you can. I hope you will. But either way, trust you still. So God, I pray that to you today. On my best day, I'm pretty broken. On my worst day, I'm pretty confused. But here's what I know, that I've lived a few decades on this earth, and what I've found is that you are who you say you are, and I trust the character that is you. And when it seems like the circumstances aren't matching your character, I'm going to choose to trust until I can understand. And even if it's not on this side of eternity, I know there will be a day when who you are shows through in my circumstances, and you redeem the pain, you redeem the struggle, you redeem the confusion. And I trust you for that. Would you help our friends who are watching to do the same? We ask it in your name. Thanks for watching.